You're a burden on society. Get a real job instead of sitting at home all day doing nothing." My husband Daniel's voice cut through the laughter of his friends gathered in our spacious living room, their eyes all turning to me with a mixture of pity and amusement that made my skin crawl with humiliation. I stood frozen in the doorway, holding a heavy silver tray of gourmet snacks I'd spent the entire morning carefully preparing for them, my face burning with deep shame as they erupted into loud, mocking laughter at his cruel joke. The sound echoed through our expensive downtown apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and imported Italian marble countertops, the luxurious space I'd purchased with my own money 3 years ago, though none of them sitting in my living room had the slightest idea about that particular truth. My name is Alexandra Marie Winters, and I'm 32 years old. This moment, this terrible moment of public humiliation in my own home, was about to become the catalyst for the most satisfying day of my entire life. But to understand how we got here, to truly comprehend the depth of what happened next and why it mattered so much, I need to take you all the way back to the very beginning of my story and how I became the person standing in that doorway. I met Daniel 5 years ago at an elegant charity gala held in downtown Seattle on a cool autumn evening. It was one of those sophisticated, black-tie events where wealthy donors gathered to write substantial checks and feel good about themselves while sipping expensive champagne imported from France and networking with other influential people. I was there because I'd donated a significant amount of money to the cause, a childhood literacy program that was particularly close to my heart. But I'd arrived alone that evening, dressed in a beautiful but understated navy blue dress that was elegant and tasteful without being flashy or attention-seeking. I made it a very deliberate point never to draw too much attention to myself at these public events where the wealthy gathered. Daniel approached me at the crowded bar during the cocktail hour before dinner was served. He was incredibly handsome, with dark hair styled perfectly and striking blue eyes that seemed to see right through me, impeccably dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit that fit him like it was made specifically for his body, and he seemed genuinely interested in me as a person, rather than trying to impress me with his accomplishments or the size of his wallet like so many men at these events did. We talked for hours that night about everything imaginable, from books we loved and authors we admired, to places we wanted to travel and see someday, to our philosophies on life and success, and what truly mattered in this world. He was charming and funny, thoughtful and intelligent, and seemed to have genuine substance beneath the attractive exterior that initially drew my eye. He told me during that first conversation that he worked in middle management at a successful tech company in the city, that he made decent money doing project management work, coordinating teams and deliverables, and that he was ambitious and driven to climb the corporate ladder over time through hard work and dedication. What he didn't know, what I very deliberately and carefully didn't tell him during our courtship, or even in the early years of our relationship, was that I owned that specific tech company he worked for and was so proud to be part of, and 3 other successful companies just like it operating in different sectors. You see, I'd built my first company from absolutely nothing when I was just 23 years old, fresh out of college with a computer science degree and a head full of ambitious dreams about changing the world through technology. It was a software solution for small businesses that I'd coded entirely by myself, in my tiny studio apartment while working 2 exhausting jobs to pay rent, and eating cheap ramen noodles for dinner every single night because that was all I could afford on my limited budget. I poured every spare moment of my time, every ounce of creative energy I possessed, every bit of technical knowledge I had accumulated during my education and self-study into building something that would solve real problems for real people in the business world who needed better tools to manage their operations efficiently. By age 25, after 2 brutal years of 16-hour workdays and countless rejections from investors who didn't believe in my vision and devastating setbacks that almost made me quit entirely and get a regular job, I'd grown that scrappy little startup company to the point where a much larger corporation wanted to acquire it and integrate the technology into their existing platform. I sold it for $8 million. $8 million at 25 years old, when most of my college friends were still paying off massive student loans and living with multiple roommates in cramped apartments. I'd gone from eating cheap ramen in a cramped studio, apartment with stained carpets and broken appliances, to being a multimillionaire in just 2 years of relentless hard work and personal sacrifice. But I didn't stop there or rest on my success like some people might have done after achieving that kind of financial windfall at such a young age. I took a substantial portion of those earnings and started another company, applying everything I'd learned from the first venture about what worked in the marketplace and what didn't resonate with customers. Then another company after that one took off and became profitable. Then another one after that when I saw another market opportunity. I had a genuine talent for identifying gaps in competitive markets that nobody else seemed to see or pay attention to. Understanding what customers actually needed in their daily operations versus what they said they wanted when you asked them directly, and creating elegant technological solutions that people were genuinely willing to pay premium prices for because they solved real pain points and made their lives significantly easier by the time I met Daniel at that charity gala when I was 27 years old and feeling successful but lonely. I was worth approximately $45 million, and that number was climbing steadily every single quarter as my companies grew and expanded into new markets and territories. I owned multiple successful companies operating in different sectors of the tech industry, had my hands in various strategic investments in promising startups run by talented entrepreneurs, and had accumulated more money than I could realistically spend in several lifetimes, even if I lived extravagantly and bought whatever I wanted without ever thinking about price tags or budgets. But I'd also learned some extremely painful and expensive lessons about wealth and romantic relationships over the years before meeting Daniel. I'd had 2 serious relationships before him, both of which had fallen spectacularly apart in devastating ways the moment the men discovered my true net worth and financial status and what that meant for the power dynamics in our relationship. The first boyfriend, whose name was Marcus. Yes, ironically, the same first name as one of Daniel's friends, though obviously a completely different person with no connection whatsoever, became controlling and possessive almost overnight when he learned about my wealth through seeing some financial documents I'd accidentally left out on my desk. He suddenly decided he needed to manage my money and help me make better business decisions, despite having absolutely no business experience or financial expertise himself, beyond balancing his own personal checking account and paying his bills on time. He started making unilateral decisions about my companies without consulting me first, tried to insert himself into my board meetings as my supposed representative, and became intensely jealous and resentful when I wouldn't let him take over my business operations and pushed back firmly against his interference in my professional life. The relationship became toxic and unhealthy and ended very badly with lawyers getting involved and cease and desist, letters being sent back and forth. The second relationship was even worse in some ways that cut deeper emotionally and left scars that took years to heal. That boyfriend, whose name was James, became deeply insecure about the substantial wealth disparity between us once he found out the truth about my financial situation. He constantly accused me of thinking I was better than him, of looking down on him because of money and success and status, of using my wealth as a weapon in arguments, even when I never mentioned finances at all, or brought up money in our discussions. He picked fights about absolutely everything imaginable, where we ate dinner and who chose the restaurant, what car we drove and who was driving at any given time, who paid for what, and what that meant about power dynamics and control in the relationship, turning every simple decision into a battlefield of his insecurity and resentment that poisoned everything good between us. Eventually, the relationship collapsed under the crushing weight of his complete inability to handle being with a woman who was more financially successful than him. And we parted ways bitterly with harsh words exchanged. So when I met Daniel at that charity gala and felt a genuine connection forming between us over the course of that evening, I made a very conscious, very deliberate decision that would end up changing everything about our relationship and how it developed. I would hide my wealth completely and see if he could love me for who I was as a person at my core, not for what I had in my various bank accounts or what I could provide financially or the doors I could open for him professionally through my connections and influence. I would present myself as just a regular working woman with a regular middle-class income and see if we could build something real and authentic together based on genuine compatibility and emotional connection. I dressed modestly when we went out on dates together in those early months, choosing nice but not extravagant clothing from mainstream department stores, rather than the designer boutiques on the upscale shopping streets that I could easily afford to shop at regularly. I drove a decent but unremarkable Honda Accord that I kept specifically for this purpose, instead of the luxury vehicles I actually owned and kept stored in a private garage across town. I told him I did freelance consulting work that allowed me to work from home with flexible hours, which wasn't technically a lie at all since I did consult extensively on business strategy and technology solutions, just for my own companies under my role as principal owner and founder rather than for outside clients who would pay consulting fees. I even moved into his apartment initially during the first year of our relationship, a nice but modest 2-bedroom place in a middle-class neighborhood with street parking and older appliances, and contributed equally to rent and household expenses from what he believed was my consulting income from various clients. I played the role of a normal working woman with a normal middle-class income perfectly, never slipping up or giving any hints about my real situation, and Daniel seemed to fall genuinely in love with that version of me I was presenting to him. He never questioned my vague job description, never asked to see pay stubs or tax returns to verify my income claims, never pushed for specific details about my consulting clients or the projects I was supposedly working on during my days at home. He just accepted what I told him at face value and seemed perfectly happy with our life together and the relationship we were building day by day. The first year of our relationship was genuinely wonderful and filled with happiness and excitement about our future together. Daniel was attentive and considerate of my feelings, loving and romantic with thoughtful gestures, supportive of my work, even though he didn't fully understand what I actually did all day when I was supposedly consulting for clients. We'd go on modest dates together, nice restaurants but not expensive ones with celebrity chefs and extensive wine lists, weekend trips to the coast but staying in reasonable hotels rather than luxury resorts with spa services and oceanfront suites. Activities that were fun and meaningful but not extravagant or showy in any way that would attract attention. I felt like I'd finally found someone who loved me for who I truly was as a person at my core, not for my money or status or what I could do for them financially or professionally, or the important connections I could provide through my business network. We got married after 2 years of dating in a small, intimate ceremony with just close family and a few friends present to witness our vows and celebrate with us. I wore a beautiful but affordable wedding dress from a mainstream bridal shop, rather than a designer gown from a famous fashion house. We had the reception at a nice but not extravagant venue with good food and a DJ rather than a live band with multiple musicians. Everything was lovely and meaningful but modest in scope and cost. Daniel never once questioned why I didn't want a huge expensive wedding with hundreds of guests and elaborate decorations and a famous venue. I'd told him I preferred intimate gatherings and meaningful celebrations over showy displays of wealth, which was absolutely true and aligned with my actual values and personality. The first year of our marriage continued in the same positive vein as our relationship had been. We were happy together, or at least I genuinely thought we were building something solid and lasting that would endure through challenges. Daniel would come home from his job at the tech company. My tech company, though, he had absolutely no idea about my ownership or role there, and we'd cook dinner together in our small kitchen, watch movies curled up on the couch, take weekend trips to explore new places and make memories, make love, talk about our future together and our dreams for what life might hold for us as a couple. I felt like I'd built something real with him, something based on genuine connection and compatibility, rather than financial interest or status seeking, or what I could provide materially to enhance his lifestyle. But slowly, gradually, like a creeping fog rolling in from the ocean, obscuring everything in its path until you can't see clearly anymore, things started to change in ways I didn't immediately recognize as serious warning signs of trouble ahead in our relationship. It started with small comments about my work, little remarks that seemed innocent enough at first glance and easy to brush off as nothing serious. "Still doing consulting today?" he'd ask with a slightly dismissive tone when he came home from the office each evening. "Must be nice to make your own hours and not have a real boss breathing down your neck like the rest of us do in traditional office environments with supervisors and performance reviews." I'd laugh it off casually, thinking he was just stressed from his own job pressures and deadlines and difficult coworkers, not reading the subtle undertone of growing resentment that was beginning to creep into his voice like poison spreading slowly. Then the comments became more frequent and more pointed, harder to dismiss as simple jokes or stress relief from a long day at work. "I wish I could just work from home in my pajamas all day like you do," he'd say while getting dressed in his business casual clothes for the office each morning, adjusting his tie in the mirror and checking his appearance. Some of us have to actually go into an office and deal with real workplace pressure and office politics and difficult people all day long. It must be so easy and relaxing to just sit at home and send some emails to clients and call it a day without any real stress or challenges. The comments escalated significantly after we'd been married for about 2 years into our relationship. By that point, Daniel had been promoted twice at the company. My company, though, the irony of that fact never stopped being surreal to me, and was now a senior manager overseeing a substantial team of 15 people reporting directly to him. His salary had increased substantially with each promotion he received, and with that increased income and status in the company, his ego seemed to inflate proportionally like a balloon being filled with hot air that kept expanding and growing larger. He started talking constantly and obsessively about his success and his achievements, how his hard work was finally paying off and being recognized by senior leadership and the executive team who made important decisions. He started spending considerably more money on expensive material things to show off his newfound status. Designer clothes from high-end stores in the upscale shopping district, a luxury watch that cost $15,000 that he showed off to everyone who would look at his wrist, a brand new sports car that cost more than most people make in an entire year of full-time work at a regular job. He started acting like he was some kind of big shot in the business world, someone important and successful and powerful, someone who'd really made it, and deserved recognition and respect from everyone around him in his social circle. And most painfully for me, he started belittling my work more and more openly, with increasing frequency and harshness in his tone that cut deeper each time he spoke. You know, Alexandra, at some point you should probably think seriously about getting a real career with actual advancement potential and a clear path forward for your professional development, he said one evening over dinner at our dining table, his tone casual but his words cutting deep like knives into my heart. Freelance consulting is fine for earning some extra spending money on the side to supplement income for shopping or hobbies, but it's not exactly a serious profession with real advancement opportunities or prestige in the professional world that people respect. You're 30 years old now and not getting any younger. Don't you want to actually accomplish something meaningful and substantial with your life? Something you can be genuinely proud of when you look back on your career someday when you're old? I'd stared at him across the table, genuinely shocked by his words and the casual cruelty behind them that seemed to come so naturally to him now. I like what I do, I'd responded carefully, trying to keep my voice neutral and avoid any confrontation that might escalate the situation into a full argument. It pays well enough for my needs and gives me the flexibility to manage my own schedule and work on projects I find interesting and fulfilling intellectually. Does it, though? He'd challenged directly, leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed over his chest in a defensive posture. Pay well? Because from what I can see from our joint finances and monthly expenses and credit card bills, you make maybe $40,000 or $50,000 a year at most with your little consulting gigs here and there with various clients. That's barely anything in this expensive city with our high cost of living and rent prices that keep going up. Meanwhile, I'm pulling in close to $200,000 now with my salary and performance bonuses combined from my position at the company where I manage important projects. I'm essentially supporting both of us at this point financially, carrying the entire financial burden of this household on my shoulders alone without any real help from you. The irony was almost too much to bear. So thick and obvious I could practically taste it like something bitter coating my tongue. The salary he was so incredibly proud of and bragged about constantly to anyone who would listen. I'd personally approved it in quarterly board meetings where compensation decisions were made. The bonuses he talked about enthusiastically to anyone who would listen at parties. I'd signed off on those too, working through my CEO and board of directors who knew my real identity but respected my fierce desire for privacy in my personal life outside of work. The expensive apartment we'd moved into a year ago with the stunning city views and modern amenities and high-end finishes, I owned the entire building outright as an investment property, though the lease was in both our names, so he thought we were just regular renters paying monthly rent like everyone else in the building. But I bit my tongue hard enough to almost draw blood and said absolutely nothing at all in response, still desperately hoping against all evidence that this was just a temporary phase he was going through with his career success. That the kind and respectful man I'd fallen in love with 5 years ago was still in there somewhere underneath. This growing arrogance and cruelty that seemed to consume more of him each passing day. The real turning point in our marriage, the moment I started to realize how truly bad things had become between us, came about 6 months ago when everything shifted dramatically in our household dynamic. Daniel started inviting his work friends over to our apartment regularly for poker nights, with expensive cigars and premium whiskey. Weekend football watching parties that lasted all day Sunday and into the evening, and casual hangout sessions that would stretch late into the night with loud laughter and crude jokes. There were 5 men who became regular fixtures at our place. 5 men whose faces and voices I grew to absolutely dread hearing at our door announcing their arrival. There was Marcus, Daniel's closest friend and colleague at the same company. A loud and obnoxious man in his mid-30s who thought he was funnier and smarter than he actually was, and dominated every conversation. There was Jake, another manager from a different department who worked on separate projects, who had a distinctly cruel streak and seemed to genuinely enjoy making others feel uncomfortable with his comments. There was Tyler, a younger guy in his 20s from their gym who'd recently been hired at the company in an entry-level position, eager to fit in with the older, more established guys and prove himself worthy of their friendship. There was Ryan, someone Daniel had gone to college with years ago, who now worked at the company too in a different role, generally quiet but always laughing along enthusiastically with the cruel jokes the others made at people's expense. And occasionally Brett would join them, their boss's nephew, who'd been given a cushy position despite having minimal qualifications or demonstrable work ethic or any real skills. I'd tried genuinely hard to be a good host to these men, welcoming them into our home with a smile on my face, preparing elaborate snacks and drinks that took hours of work, being friendly and sociable even when they barely acknowledged my considerable efforts or thanked me for what I'd done. But increasingly over those months, I noticed how Daniel behaved completely differently around them compared to when we were alone together. He became louder and more aggressive, more boastful about his achievements, more domineering in his manner of speaking. And most painfully for me, he became dismissive and outright cruel toward me in ways he never was when we were alone together in private. They encouraged this terrible behavior from him, laughing enthusiastically at his jokes at my expense, making their own degrading comments about housewives and trophy wives and women who had it easy staying home while real workers went to offices and dealt with stress. The comments got progressively worse and more cruel every single time they gathered in our living room. Must be nice to have a sugar mama situation going on here. Jake had joked once during one of their gatherings, thinking he was being absolutely hilarious and original. Oh wait, it's the other way around entirely, isn't it? You're the sugar daddy here, Dan, supporting your lady while she plays on her laptop all day and pretends to work. They'd all laughed loudly and obnoxiously, while Daniel had grinned proudly and shrugged as if to say, "What can you do about women who don't want to work real jobs?" Another time during a football party, Marcus had directly asked me in front of everyone what I did for work and how I spent my days. When I'd explained calmly that I did consulting work for various clients on business strategy, he'd smirked in that infuriating, condescending way of his that made me want to slap him. That's what unemployed people say when they don't want to admit they're desperately job hunting online, right? Consultant is such a fancy professional word for scrolling through LinkedIn, all day in your pajamas and sending out resumes that never get any responses from companies. Daniel hadn't defended me at all in that moment when I needed him to stand up for me. He'd actually laughed along with Marcus and added his own cruel comment to pile on. She's very committed to her career, guys. Very, very committed to her laptop and her comfortable pajamas and her flexible schedule that lets her do whatever she wants. More laughter from the group, louder this time, feeding off each other's cruelty like a pack of hyenas. I'd started retreating to our bedroom when they came over to avoid the humiliation, not wanting to subject myself to their constant mockery and disrespect and degrading comments, but Daniel would sometimes come find me and insist forcefully that I join them in the living room. He'd say I was being antisocial and weird, that I was being rude to his friends and embarrassing him in front of them by hiding away. So I'd reluctantly go back out there with a forced smile, endure their comments and cruel jokes about women and work, and count down the minutes until they finally left our apartment and I could breathe again. Which brings us back to that fateful moment 3 days ago. The moment that changed absolutely everything forever and set this whole chain of events in motion. Daniel had invited all 5 of them over for Sunday afternoon football games and beer. I'd spent the entire morning preparing elaborate gourmet snacks that required considerable time and effort. Homemade buffalo wings with 3 different sauce options, including a spicy one and a honey garlic, loaded nachos with fresh ingredients and homemade cheese sauce, 7-layer dip with all the traditional fixings, specialty cocktails I'd researched recipes for online specifically for this gathering. I was trying so hard to be hospitable and welcoming, despite knowing exactly how they'd treat me based on past experience. Still trying desperately to be the good, supportive wife. Still trying to make Daniel happy and proud of me even though he gave me no reason to do so. When I brought the heavy tray out to the living room where they were all gathered around our massive flat-screen television that took up most of one wall, beers already in hand and already getting loud and rowdy. Daniel had chosen that precise moment to make his cruelest comment, yet in front of everyone. "You're a burden on society. Get a real job instead of sitting at home all day doing nothing productive with your life." The words hit me like a physical slap directly across my face. The room absolutely erupted in raucous laughter that seemed to shake the walls. Marcus high-fived Daniel enthusiastically across the coffee table. Jake nearly spit out his beer, laughing so hard he was choking. Tyler was bent over, double holding his sides. Ryan was wiping actual tears from his eyes from laughing so much. Even Brett, who barely knew me at all and had only been to our apartment a handful of times, was laughing along with the crowd to fit in. I stood there completely frozen in place, the tray shaking visibly in my hands from the rage coursing through me, my face burning with humiliation and fury so intense I could feel it coursing through my entire body like electricity. In that singular moment, something inside me snapped violently and completely. Not broke, snapped. Like a switch being violently flipped from off to on. Like a dam finally bursting catastrophically after years of pressure building up behind it with nowhere to go. I'd spent 5 long years hiding who I really was, hoping desperately to find authentic love based on genuine connection. I'd spent 3 years married to a man who I thought respected and valued me as a person and partner. I'd spent the last year enduring increasing disrespect and cruelty, making excuses for his terrible behavior, hoping naively he'd change back into the man I'd originally married. And now this public humiliation in my own home that I owned, in the apartment I'd purchased, from the man who'd vowed solemnly to love and cherish me through everything. I carefully set the tray down on the coffee table with trembling hands that I struggled to control and keep steady. Then I smiled at all of them. Not a warm smile. Not a friendly smile. A cold, calculating smile that radiated danger, and made Marcus actually stop laughing mid-guffaw, and look at me strangely with confusion and growing concern on his face. "That's a really interesting perspective." "Daniel," I said quietly, my voice deadly steady despite the absolute rage burning like wildfire inside me. "Really interesting coming from you specifically of all people in this room." "Oh, come on, babe. Don't be so ridiculously sensitive about everything like you always are," Daniel said dismissively, waving his hand at me like I was an annoying fly buzzing around. "We're just joking around here having fun. Learn to take a joke for once in your life instead of being so uptight about everything." "I'm not being sensitive at all," I replied calmly, still wearing that cold, dangerous smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I'm just thinking about how incredibly funny and ironic it is that you, of all people in this entire room, would dare to talk to me about employment and contribution to society and working real jobs." "What's that supposed to mean exactly?" he asked, his smile fading slightly as he picked up on something dangerous in my tone that wasn't quite right. Some warning signal. "It means that I think it's time I stopped living a lie," I said clearly and calmly, my voice strong and unwavering. "Time I stopped pretending to be someone I'm not for your benefit. Time I stopped protecting your pathetically fragile ego from the truth about who I really am and what I've accomplished." The room had gone completely quiet now. The game forgotten. All 6 of them were staring at me with varying expressions of confusion, curiosity, and growing concern about where this was going. "Alexandra, what are you talking about?" Daniel asked, irritation and a hint of nervousness creeping into his voice now. "You're being weird and dramatic and making everyone uncomfortable right now." "Stop it. Am I being dramatic?" I pulled out my phone from my pocket. "Let me show you something. All of you, since you all work at Technova Solutions and are so proud of your jobs there, you might find this particularly interesting and enlightening." Technova Solutions was the name of the company where all 6 of these men worked and drew their paychecks from. The company Daniel had been employed at for 7 years and climbed the ladder at. The company he was so incredibly proud to work for and told everyone about. The company whose CEO and founder was notoriously private and mysterious, rarely appearing in public or at company events, working through trusted executives and board members to maintain complete anonymity. I pulled up the company website on my phone and turned the screen toward them so they could all see it clearly. "See this? Technova Solutions. Founded 8 years ago by A.M. Winters." That's me, Alexandra Marie Winters. I kept my maiden name for all business purposes to maintain separation between my personal and professional lives. The room was dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Daniel's face had gone deathly pale like he'd seen a ghost. "That's not funny, Alexandra. Stop joking around right now. This isn't funny at all." It's not a joke at all, I said coldly, pulling up more detailed information on my phone screen. See this? The company structure and ownership breakdown showing exactly who owns what percentage. I own 75% of all shares. I founded this company when I was 24 years old, with money I made from selling my first successful startup. I built it from absolutely nothing, from an idea in my head and code I wrote myself in a tiny apartment. Every single one of you sitting here works for me, for my company. You all work for me. I swiped to another screen showing internal company data. Marcus, you were hired 4 years ago as a mid-level manager after 3 rounds of interviews. Your current annual salary is $165,000. Jake, you make $142,000 annually. Tyler, you're still in your probationary period at $95,000. Ryan, $128,000. Brett, you make $130,000 despite having the least experience and qualifications of anyone here. But that's because your uncle lobbied hard for you, and I foolishly approved it against my better judgment. Their faces were various shades of white and red now. Shock and disbelief and dawning horror written across every single feature as the reality sank in. And Daniel, I turned to face my husband directly, who looked like he might actually faint or vomit right there on our expensive rug. You make $198,000 annually, plus quarterly performance bonuses that have totaled approximately $60,000 over the past year alone. Every promotion you've received and bragged about, every raise you celebrated, every bonus you've spent on expensive toys, I approved them all personally. Through my CEO and board of directors to maintain my privacy. But I personally reviewed every decision and approved every dollar. I've been signing off on your entire career advancement for years without you having even the slightest idea who was really behind it all. This is completely insane, Daniel stammered, his voice shaking badly. You're lying. You're making this all up. This is some kind of sick, twisted joke to embarrass me. Am I lying? I pulled up yet another screen on my phone. Here's my personal email address that you can verify right now. awinters@technovasolutions.com. Watch closely, everyone. I typed a quick test email and hit send with a deliberate tap. Immediately, all 6 of their phones buzzed simultaneously with incoming email notifications, the sound filling the silent room like an alarm. They looked down at their phones with shaking hands, then back up at me with widening eyes full of shock, then back down at their phones to confirm what they were seeing, their expressions shifting from complete disbelief to dawning horror to absolute panic about what this meant. That email I just sent from my phone right in front of you, it came from the founder's personal email account that you all know, the account that only sends company-wide emails maybe twice a year for major announcements about strategy changes or acquisitions. Check your email history right now on your phones. Every major company announcement, every policy change, every strategic pivot, every important decision, they all came from this exact email address. My email address. Because I'm the founder. I'm your boss. I'm the person who ultimately decides if you keep your jobs or not. Marcus actually stood up from the couch, his phone shaking visibly in his hand like he had tremors. But the CEO. We've all been told that the founder is extremely private for security reasons, works remotely from an undisclosed location, almost never comes to the office for safety and privacy reasons. Because I wanted to keep my business life and personal life completely separate from each other, I explained with cold calmness. I hired an excellent CEO named Jennifer to handle day-to-day operations and be the public face of the company at events and in the media. I attend board meetings virtually under a pseudonym so nobody knows who I really am. I review detailed reports and make strategic decisions from home right here. You know, that so-called consulting work Daniel finds so amusing and pathetic and meaningless. The work he thinks is me sitting around in my pajamas doing nothing all day like a lazy housewife. I've been running a multi-million-dollar company with hundreds of employees while he's been mocking me constantly for being unemployed and worthless. The irony is almost too perfect to be real. Oh my God, Jake whispered, his face completely ashen and drained of all color. We've been mocking our boss for months. The founder, the owner, the person who signs our paychecks every 2 weeks. Yes, you absolutely have. I agreed with that cold smile still on my face. For months now, every single cruel joke about unemployed housewives living off their husbands, every degrading comment about trophy wives and sugar mamas and women who have it easy, every dismissive remark about my so-called fake consulting career, every laugh at Daniel's cruel jokes at my expense. I heard every single word of it. And I remembered every single insult. Every single one. I documented it all. I turned my full attention back to Daniel, who was sitting frozen on the couch like a statue, unable to move or speak or process what was happening. You asked me to get a real job, darling husband. Well, I have one. I have multiple companies, actually. Technova Solutions is just the largest and most successful one that I'm known for. I also own 2 smaller software companies, operating in different niches, and have majority shares in a data analytics firm that's growing rapidly. My personal net worth as of last quarter's financial assessment was approximately $48 million. Those expensive upgrades you've been making to what you think is our rental apartment over the past year, the new furniture, the new high-end appliances, the renovations to the bathroom and kitchen. I own this entire building, this apartment, every single apartment on every floor above and below us, the ground floor retail spaces, all mine. I bought this entire building 3 years ago as an investment property with rental income. You've been bragging constantly about how you're supporting us financially, when the reality is, I've been supporting you our entire relationship without you having any clue. Why? Daniel's voice came out as barely a whisper, broken. Why would you hide all of this from me? Why would you lie about everything for years? Because I wanted to know if you could love me for who I am as a person at my core, not for what I have in my bank account or what I could provide for you materially, I said. And for the first time my voice cracked slightly with genuine emotion breaking through. I wanted a partner who respected me as an equal human being, not someone who wanted access to my money or felt threatened and insecure about my success. I've had relationships completely ruined by wealth before meeting you, and for a while, I genuinely thought I'd finally found that with you. I thought you were different, but over the past 2 years, I've watched you transform into someone I don't even recognize anymore. You've become arrogant, cruel, dismissive, disrespectful. You've mocked me publicly, belittled my worth as a human being, treated me like I'm some kind of freeloader or burden on society when the reality is, I've been financially supporting both of us this entire time without you knowing. You married someone you thought was beneath you financially, and you enjoyed that power dynamic immensely. Well, surprise, I'm not beneath you. I never was beneath you. I'm so far above you financially and professionally that you can't even begin to comprehend the gap between us. Alexandra, he started to say something, but I held up my hand firmly to silence him. I'm not finished speaking yet. While I've been listening patiently to all of your cruel jokes and degrading commentary about me being a burden on society who needs to get a real job, I've also been watching your actual performance at work very carefully. All of you. I pulled up another document on my phone, and I've been reviewing detailed reports from our HR department about workplace behavior and conduct issues. Marcus, you've had 3 formal complaints filed against you in the past 8 months for creating a hostile work environment and making inappropriate comments. Jake, your department has the highest turnover rate in the entire company. People keep quitting specifically because of your terrible management style and how you treat your subordinates. Tyler, you've been late to work 17 times in the 3 months you've been employed with us, which is completely unacceptable. Ryan, you've been inflating your project reports to make your contributions look more significant than they actually are. And yes, we absolutely noticed the discrepancies. And Brett, you've been essentially useless despite your generous salary, coasting entirely on your family connection, and contributing virtually nothing of actual value to the company. The color drained from their faces like water from a sink. Brett actually looked like he might be physically sick right there. And Daniel, I turned back to face my husband with ice in my voice and eyes. You've been taking credit for work your team members have done. I've had multiple confidential reports from people on your team that you present their ideas as your own in meetings with upper management, that you throw them under the bus when projects go wrong, but take all the credit when things go right. You've been a toxic presence in a company I've worked incredibly hard to build into something positive and productive with good culture. So here's exactly what's going to happen next, I continued, my voice returning to that cold, calm, authoritative tone. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp, all 6 of you are going to receive formal termination notices via email, effective immediately. You're all fired. Every single one of you is terminated. The room exploded with protests and shocked exclamations and desperate pleas for mercy. You can't do this to me, Marcus shouted, his face red with rage and panic. This is wrongful termination! I'll sue the company. I'll get a lawyer and take you to court. You can certainly try to sue if you want to waste your money, I replied calmly and coldly, but I have extensive documentation of every complaint. every policy violation, every performance issue for each of you going back months. I have emails, detailed reports, witness statements from other employees, everything meticulously documented by our very thorough HR department. Any lawyer you consult will tell you very clearly that you don't have a legal case here. But please, by all means, waste your money trying if it makes you feel better about the situation. This is all because we made some jokes? Jake asked desperately, his voice cracking with emotion. You're firing all of us over some harmless jokes among friends? I'm firing you because you're not good employees who contribute value, I corrected firmly. The cruel jokes just finally motivated me to stop ignoring the serious problems I've been seeing in the performance reports for months. If you'd been excellent workers who happened to treat me poorly on a personal level, I probably would have just ended my personal relationship with you and kept you employed. But you're terrible employees who don't perform well, and you treated me terribly on a personal level. So you're fired. It's really that simple. Tyler stood up, his hands visibly shaking badly. Please, I just started this job a few months ago. This is my first real position out of college. I desperately need this job to pay my bills. I have massive student loans to pay back every month. You should have thought about that before showing up late 17 times in 3 months, I said without any sympathy or emotion. And before laughing along enthusiastically with jokes mocking your employer and owner, actions have consequences in the real world. All of you are finally learning that important lesson today. Brett tried a different approach, his voice pleading and desperate. My uncle is going to hear about this firing. He's friends with very important and powerful people in this industry. He can make things very difficult for you and your company. Your uncle lobbied hard to get you a job you weren't remotely qualified for based on merit. And you've proven every single day since that you didn't deserve the position at all. I cut him off sharply. If he has a problem with my decision to terminate his useless nephew, he's welcome to call me directly to discuss it in detail. I'm sure that will be a very pleasant and productive conversation for him when I explain exactly why you were fired and show him the documentation of your complete lack of contribution. I turned back to Daniel, who had been silent this entire time, his expression a mixture of shock, horror, and dawning realization of everything he'd lost in this moment. As for you, husband dear, I think you need to pack your things and leave this apartment. Tonight. Right now. What? Alexandra, please, we need to talk about this situation. He started desperately. We can talk through divorce lawyers who will handle all communication, I said coldly and finally. You've humiliated me publicly in front of these people, mocked me privately for years, and shown me exactly what you think of me as a person. You married someone you thought was beneath you financially and socially, and you enjoyed that power dynamic immensely. Well, surprise ending. I'm not beneath you. I never was beneath you at any point, and now you're going to have to face the harsh reality that you threw away a marriage to a woman who genuinely loved you with her whole heart because you couldn't handle not being the primary breadwinner and having power. You lied to me about everything. He finally exploded, standing up suddenly, his face turning bright red with anger. This whole marriage has been based on a fundamental lie. You deceived me about who you really are. I kept my financial situation private to protect myself from exactly this kind of behavior and reaction. I replied calmly, refusing to be drawn into matching his anger. You claimed to love me for who I was as a person at my core. Turns out that was only true as long as you thought you made more money than me and had more status. The moment you thought you were the primary earner with more power, you became cruel and disrespectful and demeaning. So who's really the liar here? Me, for not disclosing my bank balance and net worth? Or you, for claiming to value me as an equal partner when you really just wanted someone you could feel superior to and put down? Someone you could dominate? He had no answer for that accusation. None of them did. They all stood there in my living room, in my apartment, in my building that I owned, realizing far too late exactly what they'd done and who they'd been mocking for months. Now all of you need to leave my home immediately, I said firmly with authority. Your termination notices will be in your email inboxes by 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, as I said. Your final paychecks, including any accrued vacation time and severance where applicable by law, will be processed according to standard company policy and state employment law. Your access to all company systems and buildings has already been revoked as of 5 minutes ago when I sent an encrypted message to our IT security team. So don't bother trying to log in to delete anything or take any proprietary information or data. It's already too late for that. You planned this whole thing, Marcus said, his voice shaking with rage and disbelief. You've been planning this revenge for a while, I started planning it about 3 hours ago, actually, I corrected him. Right around the time my husband called me a burden on society in front of all of you, and you all laughed like it was the funniest thing you'd ever heard in your lives. That's when I decided enough was finally enough. The rest was just pulling together documentation that was already in our HR systems and making some quick phone calls to my executive team who were standing by. One by one, they filed out of my apartment like defeated soldiers leaving a battlefield. Marcus left first, slamming the door so violently hard that a picture frame fell off the wall and shattered on the floor. Jake and Ryan left together, muttering angrily about lawyers and lawsuits that would never materialize because they had no case. Tyler left with tears streaming down his face, the reality of his unemployment sinking in hard. Brett left last, still sputtering about his uncle and connections, still not understanding that family connections couldn't save him from the consequences of his own inadequacy and laziness. Daniel remained behind, sitting on the couch, his head buried in his hands in despair. I need you to leave too, I said quietly but firmly. Alexandra, please, can't we at least talk about this situation? I know I've been terrible to you. I know I've said awful, unforgivable things. But we're married. We took sacred vows before God and family. Doesn't that mean anything at all? You violated those vows every time you mocked me, dismissed me, disrespected me as a person, I replied, my voice steady despite the emotion. You didn't physically cheat on me, but you emotionally betrayed me over and over again for years. You made me feel small and worthless in my own home. You celebrated making me feel inferior to you. I'm done. We're done. This marriage is over. Where am I supposed to go? He asked, looking up at me with red, desperate eyes. That's not my problem anymore to figure out, I said without sympathy. You make a good salary that should afford you options. Oh wait, you made a good salary. Past tense. You're unemployed now as of tomorrow morning. I guess you'll need to figure something out quickly. Maybe stay with Marcus since you two are such good friends. I'm sure he'd love to host you while you both look for new jobs together and commiserate. He slowly got up and walked to our bedroom. I could hear him packing, drawers opening and closing, hangers scraping against the rod. 20 minutes later, he emerged with 2 large suitcases and a backpack. I'm sorry, he whispered, standing in the doorway. You deserved so much better than how I treated you. Yes, I did, I agreed simply. Goodbye, Daniel. Have a good life. The door closed behind him with a final click. I was alone in my apartment, completely alone for the first time in years. And for the first time in years, I felt completely and utterly free from the weight I'd been carrying. I pulled out my phone and called my best friend Melissa, who'd been skeptically watching my marriage deteriorate for the past year. It's done, I said when she answered. I told him everything and kicked him out along with all his terrible friends. Finally, she practically shouted with joy. Oh my God, Lex, finally! I've been waiting for this day! How do you feel right now? Free, I said, and realized it was completely true. I feel absolutely free for the first time in years. The next morning, I woke up early and went into the office for the first time in over a year of working remotely. My CEO, Jennifer, was expecting me. I'd called her the night before to brief her on the entire situation and get her full support for the terminations. The HR team has everything ready and prepared, Jennifer said when I arrived at the executive suite. Termination letters drafted and reviewed by legal, final paychecks calculated down to the penny, exit procedures documented for security. They're all set to be delivered at 9 a.m. sharp. Are you absolutely sure you want to do this? This is a big move that will send shockwaves. I've never been more sure of anything in my entire life, I replied firmly. These aren't good employees, Jennifer. You've told me yourself that Marcus has been a problem for months. Jake's department is hemorrhaging talent. The others have various documented issues in their files. This isn't just personal revenge, though I won't pretend that's not part of it. This is good business sense. No arguments here from me, Jennifer agreed with a slight smile. I've been wanting to fire Marcus for months, but kept being overruled by his director who happens to golf with him regularly. Having you step in with founder's authority cuts through all that political nonsense we usually have to navigate. At 9 a.m. sharp, 6 termination emails went out simultaneously. My phone immediately started buzzing with incoming calls, all 6 of them trying desperately to reach me, trying to plead their cases, trying to negotiate. I ignored every single call and let them go to voicemail. By noon, the story had spread throughout the entire office like wildfire. The mysterious founder who nobody ever saw had personally fired 6 employees, including a senior manager. The rumor mill was spinning wildly with speculation. Some people thought there must have been serious misconduct or illegal activity. Others wondered if it was a budget-cutting measure during difficult times. A few people who knew Daniel and I were married started putting pieces together and whispering. I addressed it head-on by sending a company-wide email from my founder account to set the record straight. Dear Technova team, many of you have noticed some significant personnel changes today. I want to address this directly and transparently. 6 employees were terminated this morning for various documented performance and behavioral issues. These decisions were not made lightly and were based on extensive documentation and consultation with HR and leadership. I also want to take this opportunity to address something more personal. Some of you may have heard that one of the terminated employees was married to me. This is true. I have kept my personal life extremely private for years, which has meant that many people, including my own husband, did not know I founded this company. That privacy was my choice and my right to maintain. However, that privacy came at a significant personal cost, and I learned some difficult lessons about the importance of authenticity and the dangers of hiding who you are. Moving forward, I'll be taking a more active and visible role in the company. You'll be seeing more of me at company events, town halls, and strategic meetings. I built Technova to be a place where talented people can do their best work in an environment of mutual respect. Anyone who cannot treat their colleagues with professionalism and dignity has no place here, regardless of their position or who they're connected to. Thank you for your continued dedication to our mission and values. Best regards, Alexandra Winters, founder and principal owner. The response was overwhelming and immediate. My inbox flooded with supportive messages from employees who'd had negative experiences with the fired employees over the years. People who'd felt bullied by Marcus and his aggressive management style. Team members who'd watched Jake take credit for their work repeatedly. Colleagues who'd covered for Tyler's chronic lateness and unreliability. Everyone who'd resented Brett's nepotistic hire and incompetent performance. Several women in the company reached out, privately to thank me personally for addressing the boys' club atmosphere that had been developing in certain departments over time. Apparently, Daniel and his friends had been creating an environment that was increasingly uncomfortable for women and junior employees. Getting rid of them sent a clear message about what kind of culture I wanted to build. The divorce proceedings moved quickly and efficiently. Daniel's lawyer initially tried to argue that he deserved half of everything as community property, but my lawyer crushed that argument immediately with the prenuptial agreement and clear documentation of asset ownership. Everything, the apartment, the building, the cars, the investments, all of it, was mine. Purchased with my money before or during the marriage, but maintained as separate. Property as specified in our prenup that he'd signed. Without reading carefully, Daniel tried desperately to negotiate and get something. He wanted alimony payments. He wanted the car I'd bought for him. He wanted half the value of the apartment. His lawyer withdrew from the case when it became abundantly clear there was no legal basis for any of his demands. He found another lawyer who tried the same arguments with the same unsuccessful results. In the end, Daniel got exactly what he brought into the marriage: his old Honda Civic, his personal belongings, and the contents of his personal checking account, which was around $6,000. Everything else stayed with me as separate property. The divorce was finalized in record time, 3 months from filing to final decree. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Daniel had moved back in with his parents in their suburban house, unable to afford rent anywhere in the city on unemployment benefits. He'd applied to dozens of jobs, but found that his reputation had preceded him everywhere. Word had gotten around quickly in the industry about why he'd been fired by his own wife, and nobody wanted to hire someone who'd been terminated for being cruel and incompetent and toxic. Marcus, Jake, Ryan, Tyler, and Brett all struggled similarly with their job searches. Marcus found work eventually, but at a much lower level position and salary than he'd enjoyed at Technova. Jake's abrasive management style caught up with him. He burned through 2 jobs in 6 months, before finally accepting that he needed to fundamentally change his approach. Tyler, after being fired from his first post-college job so quickly, struggled to explain the gap on his resume to potential employers. Ryan was working in a completely different industry, his inflated project reports making it difficult to secure similar roles when references were actually checked. Brett's uncle's connections couldn't overcome his demonstrated incompetence, and last I heard through the grapevine, he was working retail while trying to figure out what to do with his life. I didn't take any pleasure in their struggles and failures. I'd simply removed toxic elements from my company and my personal life. What they did after that was their own responsibility, and not my concern. As for me, I threw myself back into my work with renewed energy and sense of purpose. I started attending company events openly as the founder for the first time. I held regular town halls where employees could ask me questions directly without filters. I instituted new policies around workplace respect and behavior that were strictly enforced. I promoted several talented women into leadership positions that had been blocked by the old boys club mentality. Technova thrived without the toxic elements poisoning the culture. With the problematic employees removed, morale improved dramatically across all departments. Retention rates increased significantly. Productivity went up measurably. We launched 2 successful new products that year and expanded into 3 new international markets. The company's valuation increased by 30%. I also started being more open about my success in my personal life. I stopped hiding my wealth or downplaying my achievements to make others comfortable. I started dating again eventually, but this time I was upfront from the very beginning about who I was and what I'd accomplished. I refused to hide or diminish myself ever again for anyone's comfort or ego. About a year after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Daniel at a coffee shop. It was unavoidable. We lived in the same city, moved in some of the same circles still. He was with a woman I didn't recognize, and he looked diminished somehow, older, defeated. "Alexandra," he said awkwardly when we made eye contact. "Hi." "Hello, Daniel," I replied politely but coolly. "This is Emma," he introduced the woman with him. "Emma, this is my ex-wife." "Nice to meet you," Emma said pleasantly, clearly unaware of our complicated history. We stood there for an awkward moment. Daniel looked like he wanted to say something important, his mouth opening and closing. "How have you been?" he finally asked. "Excellent," I said truthfully. Technova just closed a major acquisition deal. We're expanding into the European market. "It's an exciting time, that's great," he said, and I could hear the pain in his voice. The realization of everything he'd thrown away, everything he'd mocked and dismissed, was written all over his face. "I should go," I said, grabbing my coffee. "Good seeing you." As I walked away, I heard Emma ask, "Wait, Technova? Isn't that the tech company? The one worth like hundreds of millions?" I didn't stay to hear his explanation. I didn't need to. That part of my life was over, closed like a finished chapter in a book. 3 years have passed since that Sunday afternoon when everything changed forever. 3 years since I fired my husband and his friends. 3 years since I stopped hiding who I was and what I'd built. Technova is now valued at over $300 million. I've started 2 more companies. I've been featured in Forbes and Fortune magazine as one of the top female entrepreneurs under 40. I speak at conferences about building successful businesses and the importance of authenticity in both work and personal life. I've learned so much from that experience. I learned that hiding who you are to make others comfortable never works out well. I learned that respect in a relationship isn't negotiable. Without it, everything else falls apart. I learned that sometimes the people closest to us reveal who they really are when they think they have power over us. And I learned that the most satisfying revenge isn't elaborate or complicated. It's simply succeeding wildly while they watch from the sidelines. Would I do things differently if I could go back? Maybe. Maybe I would have been honest with Daniel from the beginning, and maybe he would have shown his true colors sooner, saving us both years of a doomed relationship. Or maybe he would have been different if he'd known the truth from the start. More secure, less compelled to establish dominance through cruelty. I'll never know. What I do know is that I'm happier now than I've ever been. I'm successful on my own terms. I'm surrounded by people who respect me for who I am, not who they want me to be. I wake up every morning excited about my work and my life, and I never, ever let anyone make me feel like a burden on society ever again. Daniel learned an expensive lesson that day. Never mock someone for not having a job when you have no idea who they really are or what they've accomplished. Because sometimes, the person you're mocking is the person who signs your paychecks. And karma, as they say, can be absolutely brutal. As for me, I learned that the most powerful thing you can do when someone tries to make you feel small is to stand up to your full height and show them exactly who you are. And if that means they can't handle it, if that means they crumble under the weight of your success, that's not your problem to fix. I am Alexandra Winters. I built multiple successful companies from nothing. I employ hundreds of people. I create value and opportunities and innovations. I am not a burden on society. I am the society that people like Daniel wish they could be part of. And that's the greatest victory of all.